Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me. Let me know right away in the comments if you can't hear me. I finally decided to start using my microphone. I was a little bit nervous the last few times because it's just one more thing that can go wrong. So anyhow, if you can't hear me, please comment and let me know. So, okay, very excited to get started, but until 9 o'clock, again, like my other tutorials, ask some questions if there's anything you want to know, and then I'll kind of give a brief overview of so far what I have done. Let's see. So the color wheel recipe card, hopefully everybody got that drawn out. I really think it's important to do the color wheel so that it's almost kind of like a, how would I put it? Just like a little warm up, like an exercise, just like before, if you're exercising, you do some warm up. So that's what the color wheel recipe card is for. So I actually did just a really quick one. I didn't have any bigger sheets of paper and I didn't want to break down a whole new sheet. So I went ahead and just did a quick one. And then as soon as 9 o'clock gets here, I am going to we'll start mixing some of those colors and see what we've got. The other thing I did was make sure I've got a nice, fresh, clean, round palette, and I've got my colors all freshly squeezed out and ready to go. And if you didn't see this earlier, you might want to go on to the card. I'm sorry, it's early. So you might want to go onto my website where I have all the downloads, and I'll make sure that once this stream is done that all those links get posted also on the colors and all the downloads and the image. So yeah, so let me know if anybody has any questions before we start. And we've got about, let's see, 20 minutes or so to go before I really get painting. So hope everybody is doing well and having a nice start to your morning. One thing I am a little bit concerned about is that it is very humid right now where we live. We are in our monsoon season and it has we've gotten some good rains. So it's a little bit more humid. I am used to painting when it is very, very dry. So I might have to use my hairdryer a little bit more. But I think after those first couple streams that I've done, I think it's actually a good thing because then it gives you a chance to catch up or, just kind of take a little breather. So yeah, so that's where I'm at. And so one other thing I did, and I'll mention this again right as around 9 o'clock starts so that everybody has a chance to get going. I found this new, well, I don't think it's new, but it's a masking fluid. And let me grab it here really quick. It is Daniel Smith's art masking fluid. And it came like this, and it has a bunch of these little plastic, what do you call those? Just applicator tips. And I thought, well, I'm going to just go ahead and try this. It's like another brand that I use that you can get real fine masking lines. So what I did was I used it on this image just to mask off the little stamens. Now, I did that not because I think it's necessary, but just so you can see how I did it. And then I made a couple mistakes with that particular brand, and there was a lot of bubbles in it, which I'm never happy with, because that means when that bubble pops, it's going to leave a little hole in the area that you've masked. So, and I'll show everybody that in a minute. But one thing that's really good about it is I made a lot of mistakes using that masking fluid. So when I go to paint around it and we take my masking fluid off, you're going to be able to see that. And it actually didn't take me that long. It took me like maybe 5 minutes to mask that off. So you don't have to mask that. You can just leave it alone and paint around it. And that is probably what I wanted to do. But I just want you to see just how that new Daniel Smith masking fluid looks. So, okay. All right. It looks like we've got some people that are showing up. And everybody seems to be able to hear me. Good. So I'm glad. I really love my Rode microphone. I've been using it. I use it actually for my tutorials that I film and then edit and put on my website. But again, I was a little bit nervous about using it here. It's like, just one more thing to have to go wrong. So, okay, again, anybody have any questions, just let me know. And we'll be getting started here shortly. And in the meantime, let me show you how it looks with the masking fluid on those stamens. Okay, so here we go. Let me make sure I've got plenty. My lighting's good. There we go. Okay, so I just masked out these little areas. I didn't mask this part of the stamens because you're really not, there's nothing much that you're having to worry about painting around. This is the main body of the stamens. So I just went ahead and did those little beautiful ends of the stamen where all the pollen is at, and the little lines, the tips of the stalks. So, and it's pretty dry now, although, like I was saying, I got a lot of bubbles in that. And so I can see areas that popped. I'm going to still be careful around that because I don't want to lose those beautiful white areas. And again, I most likely would have just painted around them, but that's okay. This is a good learning for you to see what happens when you make mistakes with your masking fluid. But again, if you didn't do that, it's really not that big of a deal. You can just paint around. And this one is not as complicated as that last one we did with the background. So we're going to be going right away into just, adding some colors and really working on making sure that we have good grays going on in that area, in those shadow areas. But I think what I want to do, so that if you do want to put some masking fluid down, that I'm going to go ahead and start on the green first. And let me show you what I went ahead and did with. Now, you should be seeing this. I always give everybody one of these so you can download it, and then you cut the little areas out with an X-Acto knife or scissors, trace it onto your watercolor paper. And remember, you always want to make sure you use the water paper that you are painting on so you know exactly how those colors are going to look when you end up painting on your image. Okay, so I went ahead and did this first. I didn't want to take up a whole lot of time on a color wheel. So I went ahead and put my nickel Azo Yellow, my Quinacridone Magenta, and my Phthalo Blue down. And what you do is you leave 3 spaces between each of those primary colors that you're using. It's got 3 there, 3 there, and 3 there. So, and here's what I did. I made a purple, or violet, you can call it violet, a blue violet, and then I made a red violet just to see what my color range is. And yes, I use these colors often, but you know what? It's always good to do it again before every painting. It's like a workout and a warm-up. So that's why I go ahead and do it just before every painting. And in this area, we are going to try to get those colors that we see in that image. So I went ahead and I did my orange, my yellow orange, and my red orange, which is closer to just, your standard red. And it's amazing, it's always amazing to me that the Quinacridone Magenta can make such a bright and vibrant red. And over here, I got my yellow-green, have my green, my green, my yellow-green, and my blue-green. And again, so once I make sure that as closer we get to 9 o'clock, then I'll start doing all the colors that we're going to see in this image. All right, yay! Morning, Debbie and everyone. Yay! Shannon says good morning. Good morning, everybody. So obviously everyone can hear me, so this is good. One other thing I want to point out, I'm going to switch back to the front view. My husband is not here this morning. He's working at his shop, so I will have to stop a couple times, and that's going to give everybody a chance to catch up, and I can let my dogs out. They're little chihuahuas, and they really love to sleep in the mornings, and so pretty soon I'm going to have to let them outside. So just want to let you know, if you hear barking, that's my dogs. And usually my husband is really good about keeping everything really quiet. It's so sweet of him. But yeah, so we'll be ready to start streaming in a minute. And if anybody has any questions, just plop them in the chat. I have my tea. Sherry, hi, good morning. Hi. Okay, so let me say a couple things about the image that we're painting. So the Stargazer Lily. No background, so obviously it's not going to take us as long, and we are really going to be concentrating on building beautiful grays. And we're going to get those grays from those 3 colors that we're using. And then we will be concentrating on getting those beautiful light greens and on the leaves. But if you notice in this tutorial, this live stream, we do not have a lot of really dark colors. So that's really good. So it's going to go along a little bit quicker. So I won't be on that little color wheel. We won't be worrying about really dark values because there really is none in this. So it's gonna, I'm just looking at some of the comments. Good morning, I couldn't find you. Amalia, sorry about that. I did post the links, but I'm glad you're here. I always say this, to be honest, it would be great if my YouTube channel, which I don't concentrate on it actually really at all, but if I get to 4,000 streaming hours and 1,000 subscribers, every time something plays, I will start getting a little bit of monetary return on that, maybe $10 a month. It's not that big of a deal, but I always tell people to subscribe because then my channel will notify you when I'm streaming, even if it's just all of a sudden I decide I want you to check out, my painting I am, working on, like the one in the background that I just finished, then it will let you know right away that I'm streaming. So yeah, that's just, Melissa, the link did not connect. What? Okay, so, did you try, hopefully you tried the one I posted just about maybe 20 minutes ago. So yikes. And also I have it on my my Watercolors That Glow group, and it actually showed the link to YouTube, and when I clicked on it, it went right over, so yikes. But anyhow, that's a good reason to make sure you subscribe. So, I hope nobody else has any problems finding that, but God, it's just, what can you say? It's technology. So yeah, so let's see, back to the image. So I'm gonna go, here we go. We're looking at the image, and if you just got here, I was talking earlier about, I'm trying out this new Daniel Smith Artist Masking Fluid, and it's got, it's got this little tip you cut off, and then you can put a little applicator on there, and I think they give you a whole bunch so that in case that gets, so in case they get gummed up, you can use a new one. Now, I didn't say in my intro, if you watched that, you don't have to mask this off. Really, I just did it because I wanted to try out a new masking fluid. But there's still plenty of time to mask it out. I'm going to start over on the greens. I'm going to start by adding in yellows and the greens. And so if you want to take a few minutes and you do want to mask those stamens, you can. But honestly, other than wanting to try that new masking fluid, it's not really a big deal if you don't. Okay, so now let me see what other people are saying. Melissa, if you log onto your account and think if it will work, I have that problem too. Yeah, you have to be signed in, and that way you can get all the downloads, and then you'll be able to see the link. So hopefully everybody, though, saw it on the Facebook page. So, all right, 8:50. Anyhow, again, you don't really need to mask all that off. I had actually a lot of problems using that masking fluid at first. It put a lot of bubbles. So this will be a good learning tutorial on what not to do with masking fluid. So I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot of pinholes in it because I had a lot of bubbles. So again, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I always think it's good that you see me struggling with things. Only because it just shows that not everything goes perfect. And let me go back to the front here for a minute so I can talk about this. I just finished that painting right there, and a lot of you saw that I had posted it. And boy, I have to tell you, that, believe it or not, was really tough. It was a lot harder than my previous still life, which I did with a yellow and black checkered background. I kind of made the assumption that that one would have been harder and this one would have been a lot easy because it was just kind of like these gray stripes. But oh wow, I had to do a lot of scrubbing. I had to rethink a lot of things that I did in that painting. But I feel like it came out okay, and I'm really happy with it. It was just extremely hard. And I guess the reason why I'm telling you about that, if you have not ever watched any of my live streams or any of my tutorials, nothing, or I should say that everything doesn't always go as planned, even though I carefully plan everything out from making sure that my image is composed correctly, that I have all the correct values in it, good colors, and then I spend a lot of time drawing it out, make sure I have every little contour line I need. Sometimes things just go wrong. And one of the reasons to plan carefully is so that you can avoid as many problems as possible. So, and thank you everybody for liking that. Thanks. Trust me, I think there's a lot of things that are wrong in it, but nobody else is going to see that. And you have to give yourself a little bit of grace, and just trying to get everything perfect is never going to happen. So, and that's going to happen with this tutorial. So take a deep breath. Stop if you need to. Realize that you're going to be able to watch this later on, and just realize not everything comes out perfect. And no matter how long I've been painting, I always feel like I do something wrong in one of my paintings. So give yourself a little bit of grace and realize that the more you paint, the better things are going to get and the easier it's going to get. Okay, so we're getting close to 9 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and hit down and show you again the little, my little color recipe wheel I made here. And again, you should have this in the downloads so that you can download it, cut out those circles, and then keep it, laminate it, or, you can't laminate it after you cut out the circles, but If you can usually with a really sharp X-Acto knife laminate it and then cut it out. I know I have one that's like that. But you know, and then you can put it on your piece of watercolor paper and make a little color wheel recipe card, which is what I'm going to do now. So you should be able to see my little image in the corner, and I really hope that you downloaded that image and that you either have it on your computer or you have it on your iPad or your phone, because trying to view it here on the screen is just, it's going to be a lot of trouble. I just have it up there so you can be looking at it if you just happen to be watching this. And one thing I've noticed on my YouTube, so that I can see that everything is going okay on the live screen, is my little logo's in the corner, and that's kind of annoying. So I've got to figure out how to take that off, but I'm not going to do that now. I just may move that image up a little bit. There and so you'll see that in a minute here. Okay, so let's get started. All right, we have got a lot of beautiful grays in this image. We have got, let me pull my image up here. Have to have like 3 different things pulled up on the computer so I can make sure everything's filming good and, and you can see what I'm doing. All right, so if you look at the image, obviously we have some beautiful magenta colors going on. And that's one of the reasons why, again, I'm painting with the Quinacridone Magenta, is I'm going to be able to get those gorgeous, very cool magentas. But if I had needed to, I can still get some beautiful warm reds. And the phthalo blue that I've picked is really, oh, let me get this over here. The phthalo blue that I picked is really going to help create some beautiful bright greens in here and some lovely shadows. And of course, my go-to yellow, which is Nickel Azo Yellow. Yeah, Sherry, I see that. For some reason, my Thinkific website has a lot of problems depending on the browser you have for downloading that image. So that's why I include the PDF file, because the PDF file will download right to your computer. Otherwise, if anybody else is having problems, you have to right-click on the image and do a save as, and it will then be able to save to your computer. So yeah, that's kind of a pain. And I might start just including that in emails if you email me and you need the image that way. Or even on Facebook, I can send it that way. But that's, yeah, I've notified Thinkific about that. I'm really kind of irritated that for some reason, with some people's browsers, the image will only want to save as a web file. So hopefully you'll be able to get that. Okay, so now let's try mixing some grays. I think the grays are going to be really important in this image. Let me see, I just blanked out for a second. Oh my goodness. Okay, the grays are going to be really important. So I want to start with creating some grays. So obviously you can see my palette clearly. So I am going to take, and this, I want you to do the same. Make sure that you have your colors are nice and fresh. I'm going to take a little bit of the blue and I'm going to put it in the middle. And there's a couple ways you can do that. You can mix it here or you can mix it right on your paper, but I want to go ahead and mix it right in the middle there. Okay, so here's what I've done. I've taken the phthalo blue and I've taken some of that Quinacridone Magenta and I've made kind of like a purple violet in the middle. Now I'm going to start adding a little bit of yellow. And that yellow, all 3 of those colors together are going to create a gray. Now, if you look at that gray, it's a little too much on the yellow side. So I'm going to have to keep adding color. Now it's almost a little too green. I'm going to have to add a little bit more red till I get a color close to what, well, too much red, to what I think I am seeing around the edges of that lily. Okay, now I'm back to now I'm back to having you probably, I don't know if you'll see it as much on yours, but I added a little bit too much yellow again. And that's, you know, that's okay. Sometimes it takes a while with mixing, and that's why it's so important when you're using a limited palette, because boy, are you really learning how to get those colors. If it's a little bit too much on the yellow side, add a little bit, try adding some blue, then try adding some red. If you get it too blue, then try adding a little bit of the red and a little bit of the yellow. So you can keep going back and forth. So now you can see that I've gotten, that is really pretty close to what I'm seeing in the image. Now let's see what happens if I pick up just a little bit of yellow and I add it in one area. Now it really warms up that gray. Let's see what happens if I add a little bit of red over here. Now you can see how I've warmed up that gray, but more towards the red side. Adding a little bit more blue. And now I've made that gray a little bit cooler with some of the blue. So instead of using Payne's gray or Davies gray, you're mixing those grays yourself. And trust me, when we get going on that image, those areas are gonna look so beautiful because you're gonna see everything. You're gonna see all the yellows and the reds and the blues, and they're all gonna mingle together, and it's just gonna be so much prettier than just sticking a boring old Payne's gray on there. So gray, I've got that down. Now let's see if I need to do a whole lot to the magenta. So let's take some of that magenta, and I'm just putting it down on the dry paper. You know, I'm not trying to get this perfect right now. I just want to see how much I might need to change or what I'm going to have to add to the magenta to make it look really close to those petals. And I'm not really going to have to do a lot. Now I do see areas, especially along the top edges where it meets in with the gray, that I might have to add a little bit of that phthalo blue and just kind of warm it up even more. So I feel like that area is going to be really good right along there. So I know now I'm going to be able to get those colors. And that honestly is really going to be about it for those petals. We've got our grays, we've got our magenta, and just by adding a little bit of that blue, we're going to get some good color variations. Now, if you have not watched one of my live streams or any of my tutorials, be very, very careful with phthalo blue. It is an extremely strong color, but it's very permanent and it's extremely transparent, and it just makes beautiful colors. But be careful with it. Don't overwhelm your color. And if you do, well, once you start mixing those colors, you're going to really be learning about how strong those colors are. And that's why it's so great to paint with a limited palette, because after a while, you really start knowing how your colors react with each other. Okay, so now let's go on to that green. Let's try to get those beautiful leaf colors in there. So I am going to, this time, just throw some of that blue on there. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of that yellow. And wow, look at that gorgeous green. But I've noticed that that green is a little bit more on the yellow side. So I'm adding some more yellow. And you can see how the colors are kind of mixing and blending. And I can see some areas that are underneath the petal and some areas on the stem that are a little bit unsaturated, or you could use the word dull. So now, again, let's take our third color and let's add a little bit into there. And voila, we have a green that's now toned down a little bit. And so I just keep mixing all these colors together. And so now I have an area that's very unsaturated and an area that is very saturated. So now I know I have basically got all the colors mixed for this whole image. So I'm okay with this, so I feel like I can put this aside. And if you're doing that, or if you are busy masking off, if you wanted to, on the stamens, we can go ahead and let everybody catch up a little bit. And I'm going to talk a little bit again about the colors. So hopefully you had the color list and you've got these. But the first one is Nickel Azo Yellow. It is my go-to yellow. It is PY 150. It is very, very transparent. And hopefully, if you saw, I wouldn't call them charts, but I have about 3 different PY 150 tubes of paint on there that I sampled from different companies. And they all have different names. And Graham calls it Nickel Azo Yellow. Let's see. Winsor Newton calls it transparent yellow. And I think there are a couple other brands and they might call it transparent yellow too. I don't have my little charts in front of me. I have misplaced them. So I'm going to have to actually print them off of my computer because I, for the life of me, cannot figure out what I did with them. So anyhow, even though I've said M. Graham, I believe, on my chart, this is just an easy tube to show. This one's Winsor & Newton's phthalo blue. They call it Winsor blue. M. Graham calls it phthalo blue. That's the chemical name, and it is PB15 and then semicolon 3. But it is the green shade. There is also a red shade of phthalo blue, and it is kind of meant to mimic ultramarine blue and just be a little bit more transparent. But that's for another tutorial. And then, of course, I've got the Quinacridone Magenta, and this is the Winsor Newton. For some weird reason, M. Graham doesn't carry it, and I have no idea. I've sent them a couple notes saying, please carry it as a single pigment color. And so that's the other thing to keep in mind if you have not watched any of these tutorials, that these are all single pigment, very transparent, and very staining. But I use that to my advantage so I can build up beautiful glowing color, and I can still scrub it out with my scrubber brushes. And I also have all my scrubber brushes here. I probably will have to do a little scrubbing around some of those white areas, but I always keep them on my area where I keep all my brushes. Okay, so let's get started. Oh, one more note. You probably are noticing that my lines are pretty dark, and that's because I wanted you to be able to see that on your computer, just for reference. But as I do an area, I take my kneaded eraser and I kind of make it into a little bit of a tube, and then I roll over the area and kind of get off that top layer of graphite. So there we go. It's not good to rub really hard with your eraser, because especially on those first few layers, because then you'll disturb the paper. So you don't want to do that. And of course, that's another good reason for using a digital projector. And you've probably, obviously, we've all had long conversations about that. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Okay. So I went ahead and I lightened those lines. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my palette around. I want to get the yellow close to me because I am going to start with a number 4 brush, and I'm just going to take that yellow. Let me scoot that up a little bit. I'm going to make sure those grays and that green isn't contaminating my yellow. I like to keep my yellow really clean when I first started painting, especially when I'm adding in that first layer. And if you have ever watched me paint or watched my tutorials, you know a lot of times that I'll actually start out painting a yellow layer. And if I have to do a lot of yellow, I'll actually keep yellow on a separate sheet. So I think what I'm going to do is wet this a little bit. Now remember, when you are wetting your paper, get lots of water on there, especially on these first layers. Stay to the inside. Go slow. Plenty of water because you really want that water to sink in. And if you watched my last live stream where we were doing a background, I was really talked a lot about getting that water on there and letting it sink in. Okay, so I'm going to give that a few seconds to sink in. And then I'm going to a smaller brush. This is like my number 2. That way I have a little bit more control getting into the corners. And as you can see, I also made sure that I have my paper all prepped. It is taped down, and I roll little tubes of tape and go right around the edge so that the paper doesn't try to buckle, even with 300 pound, which is what I'm using. Especially if you're doing a background, my goodness, can that paper just get a little bit of a wave in it. So I always make sure to prepare my paper really well. I use a gator board. I love it. You can cut it into any shape, but it's a little bit more firm. It's actually a lot more firm than a foam core board. And you can staple into it. I love it. And they last forever. I've had some of my boards for 10 plus years. Now, you're probably at this point, if you're painting along, it's hard not to get nervous because you're realizing, well, all the water is sinking in over there, and that's okay. Oops. Just don't do that. So the important thing is getting the water down. And then if you notice areas that are starting to dry, you can just go right back over those, and that water will wick wherever you've laid water down. Push this up a little bit. There we go. And it's also good to look at it at an angle so you can make sure you didn't miss any areas. Now, when you're doing a background, that is super important. When you're putting down yellow, not so much. Okay, so I'm going to kind of lean it at an angle so I can see areas that really need more yellow, or more water, sorry. And again, because it's kind of humid here right now, I can see areas. Oh, and I got to get that little leaf there. And if you're having a hard time making sure that you've got the water down equally and you've, got a nice edge, use a smaller brush. I know you always hear, use a bit, like on this area, use a bigger brush. On here, you want a medium brush. I paint with very small brushes, and I don't really seem to have any trouble with streaking or having areas look overworked. So it's totally okay to use a smaller brush. All right, so the water is sinking in. It's getting a nice, you know, an even sheen. It's not too glossy. And I don't have color, or I don't have any water running. If your water, when you lean it to the side, if it runs to a corner, let it soak in some more. But I'm just using yellow right now. So I think it's totally okay that I go ahead and put some of the yellow down, because it's basically covering everything, except for right there where it's just on that center, that little center fold, I guess you could say. And then you can see how nicely the yellow is blending in. I went a little dark with the yellow right there because that leaf is kind of being shaded by that petal. I didn't see this little leaf right here. That's okay. It's such a small area. Now, a lot of times when I am adding yellow on my first layer, sometimes it just depends on what I'm painting. Sometimes I don't even wet it. But here's what happens when you don't wet it. The color tends to be way too even. And instead of like when you just start adding color in when it's wet, it kind of just blends out and not every area is even. So that's the only downside to painting on the dry paper. Then you can even look at areas that don't have very much yellow, and you can kind of avoid that area and let the colors blend in. I'm actually taking some of the yellow off of this area. Okay, now you can really see how that color on that little what you call that, like the blossom right there that's going to turn into a lily. It's really sunk in. So here's what I'm going to do. I've got some yellow, but I'm going to take the tip and just take off some of that color. That way it's a little bit drier and my yellow won't spread as far. See how my brush it's kind of dry, but I still have color on it, and it's making a soft, beautiful blend right on that edge. So I lucked out and timed that just right. So I still have color. Nice, okay. Whew. First part done. Okay, so I'm going to give that a chance to dry. And let's see, where am I going to start? I purposely didn't think much. You're probably thinking, oh my gosh, does she even know what she's doing? Here, I think it's really important if you hear my thought process as I'm painting. I purposely did not think about this lily all week at all. I just put it aside. I finished up my other painting. And one of the reasons why is because I want you to see that sometimes you really have to think through what to do first, second, third, instead of me going, okay, now we're going to do this and now we're going to do this. So I want you to hear me think through the process of what I am going to paint first on these petals. So I'm thinking right now that the best way to start this is to wet the whole thing. I'm just going to go through and wet everything. I'm going to very carefully start on the outside, and I'm going to wet, and then I'll wet all the center. That way, if anything starts to dry, I can go back and just add a little bit more water till I can finally see that it's all the water is at an even sheen. And then what I think I'm going to do is go ahead, and while that's sinking in, we'll mix up a little bit more gray, and I'll start adding it all around all those outside edges and in this center area and all around there. Okay, so I think that's how I'm going to proceed. There are lots of ways to start a painting, but I think that this is going to be the best way to get this started. Okay, so let me show you something really quick. Hopefully you can see this. Do you see how all those colors that I mixed for the gray have kind of separated? That's what's so wonderful about transparent colors and staining colors is you don't get the same blah looking tube green or tube reds or tube grays. So I think that really looks beautiful. Okay, so I am going to start with my number 4. And guess what I just realized? I have to be really careful over here because that yellow isn't dry. So I'm going to take a sec. I am going to dry that. That way I can put that water on, because if I have to worry about that, that is going to bleed over into that petal. So let me dry this real quick, and that might give everybody a chance to catch up. And I can look at any questions. Okay, I think it's dry enough. Remember, when you are going to paint another area, be very careful about what you've painted next to it. So if you have used a hairdryer, and I use a hairdryer a lot because I get really impatient, and there's nothing wrong with using a hairdryer, just feel it and make sure that it's the temperature of the rest of the paper. If it feels cool, that means that it's not done drying. Like this area feels cool because I didn't have the hairdryer over here. I'm only worried about those little areas. But now that the heat of the hairdryer is gone, it feels pretty dry to me. So that's the other thing too. If you're not used to painting in layers, just make sure that after you're done with the hair dryer, let the paper cool off a little bit and then go ahead and feel it. And if it feels like the temperature of the paper, you're good. That means it's dry. If it isn't dry, what will happen is you'll have these tiny little feathery areas that sink into the next area. So, okay, let me start again. And I'm keeping to the inside because I want a nice, beautiful edge. If you do not take the time with your water to get a beautiful edge, you're going to see it as that paint dries and it's going to look just ragged. You don't want a ragged edge. Now, here's where the masking fluid is going to pay off. As I can just go right over it. But I'm going to still be very careful because of all those pinholes in there. So I'm just going to kind of, when I add the color on, I'm going to make sure I don't go over that masking fluid. So there are a lot of light areas in here and a lot of gray areas down here, but you know what? It's just easier, just wet the whole thing. And then we'll address those areas last. And I'll just be careful as I get up close to them. I'm going to turn this. Remember, don't worry about some areas looking like the paper's getting very dull, like the water's really sinking in. Because again, the minute you touch water onto an area, it automatically starts wicking out to wherever you've added water. Oh. Okay. If you need to go to a smaller brush, you can go back and forth with a smaller brush and then go back to the larger brush. Because again, it's not going to hurt having a lot of water on there. It might take a little bit longer for it to completely sink in. And usually on the first layer it does because of the surface sizing that they put in the paper. If you're using a good brand. And I know I've talked about that a lot in my other tutorials, but boy, using cheap paper just is never going to save you money. You're going to be so frustrated, and by the time you've ripped up paper, you could have just been using a really good 300 pound or 140 pound if you're okay with stretching your paper. I dislike stretching paper. To me, it's just a pain. Color never sinks down because the paper isn't thick, so I never feel like it quite sinks down as much as I want. So I'm not a fan, but if you're used to painting with 140 pound, you're used to stretching it. So there are 140 pound watercolor blocks where they've done it for you and they've glued the sides, but boy, I have to tell you, ever since Arches got bought out by Canson, the quality of their blocks has gone down. It's like as soon as you really wet one of the blocks, the edges start lifting, the glued edges. So that's really bothersome. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean it, and I can already see areas that I missed. Okay. I can see areas that are drying, like right there. So all I have to do is just add some more water. I don't have to be careful and get close to the edge because it's already gonna, it's gonna wick right to the edge that I painted. So I can see here's some areas. So you're probably thinking, well, I don't know why this matters because you're only putting the gray around the edge, but it does because you don't want there to be an edge where you can see the water wicked or the paint wicked to, or a blossom. So you just have to make sure that that water is all even. And honestly, it can be tedious, but it's your first layer and you want that to go right. That's going to set the tone for your whole painting. Okay, I think I have a nice even amount of water everywhere. And so now what I want this water to do, I'm going to roll this around because I can see where the water's puddling, and that's good. I want that at first, but now I'm going to want all that water to start sinking in and spreading out equally. So while I do that, I'm going to re-wet that little area. I'm going to drop, hopefully you can see this, some red in one area, a little tiny bit of yellow. I just want to try to get, oh, too much. Okay. Let's see a little bit more blue. Because I'm making a lighter gray, I'm really having to be careful about how much color I add in. I just saw an area I needed to fix for a moment. Okay, so while I'm waiting for that to sink in a little bit more, let me see what questions we've got there, or comments. Let's see. Bunny, I love when you said using cheap papers never saves the money. I've told many friends who keep refusing to use the good paper. Yep, all you're doing is just really wasting money. And you know what's the great thing about really good paper is you can use the other side. I actually went to the Arches. It could be any brand. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I don't maybe know because Arches is the only brand I use, but they said, yeah, you can use either side. It doesn't make any difference. The texture may be a little different on occasion, but really it honestly doesn't matter all that much. So, and then Lisa, I haven't had any problems with the Arches block. I do get some buckling with lots of watches, but if I let it dry overnight, the paper dries flat. Yeah, it may just be the watercolor blocks that I've had. Maybe they're too old, but I actually got a couple of newer ones for I'm still working on my Watercolor 101 masterclass, and I've noticed that the edge had lifted up a little bit, but who knows? It might just have been, a bad batch, could be, but yeah, the watercolor blocks are great if you don't want to use 300-pound, but boy, does it make a difference. Okay, I think everything's looking good. I've got a little bit of water pooling on these upper leaves, so I'm just going to wick some of it off. Like I said, usually here in Arizona, we are extremely dry. In fact, we have been in a mega drought, as I'm sure you've probably seen on the news. So I'm not used to painting when it's very humid. So if you are in Florida, I imagine it's taking you a while for that to sink in. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna start here and just work my way around. Oh, no, maybe I'll start up here and work my way around. Okay. So I am going to actually just get that bubble of paint off the tip so I don't have too much and it doesn't spread out too far. Okay, here we go. Very nice. That's beautiful. Actually, I'm switching to a smaller brush. That was my number 4. Now I'm going to go back to my number 2. I want a little bit more control in how much color or how much gray gets put down. I could just turn this, but for the sake of filming, I'll try to keep it like this so you can see what's going on. I'm rinsing my brush off, just spreading that color out a little bit more. Also, be very light with your brush. Kind of pull that color around with your brush. I'm going to adjust my light. There we go. Sometimes the reflection, it's hard to see. So yeah, there are limitations to online tutorials, but it's nice that we can do this. I'm grabbing just a tiny, tiny bit of that blue and really adding some water. I pulled in a little bit of that gray and just a tiny smidgen just to alter that just a hair. And I've noticed that the shadow there is just a little bit bluer. So there we go. I had my basic shadow mix, and now I just took a tiny, tiny bit. And now you can see how it's really starting to spread out. And pretty soon as it starts drying, and I better hurry because I'm seeing the sheen leaving. And when that happens, you don't want to get blossoms or blooms. Here's the other great thing about when the water is at a nice even sheen and it sinks in, and as you're going around and you're adding the color, it will spread out gently, but it basically stays where you've put it. That's what I love. And you probably noticed that I didn't roll over with my eraser and erase any of these areas, but you really are going to need to see that. So I just went ahead and left those lines the way they are. See how beautifully that color is laying down. Look at the beautiful blends. You can already see how it's just softly blending out on the edges. It's going to be fun when we put that little strip of yellow there and there. I could have done the yellow first, but you know what? There's actually not a lot of yellow in this Stargazer Lily. There's little spots of yellow, but I think that's better to just do it as we're painting. Okay, I see a little bit of a dark area right there. And right down in there. And look at how the color stays right where I put it. Yes, it blends out a little bit, but that's what you want. You don't want these really harsh, sharp edges when you are painting with layers. It's okay for things to blend a little bit. But if you do want an area that's blocked off from another area, like doing the leaves and the stem versus that area, you just make sure it's really dry. And let's see, I'm gonna adding a little bit more color in this. Now is the good time. Now is a very good time to go around, and if you're painting along, check how those shadows look. If you see some areas that are really dark in shadow and your paper still is very evenly moist, then go ahead and just drop in a little bit more color. It's kind of nice though. This humidity has actually given me a little bit more time to add in some of these shadows. So that's actually quite nice. And look at how cool that is. It is bleeding over a little bit into this area, but it's pretty much staying there. That's pretty much stayed right in that area. So it's already looking pretty cool. So I'm very happy with that. All right, so let's give that a chance to dry. I want to give you all a chance to kind of catch up, and let's see if there's any questions. And thank you, Shannon. She's so helpful. What a good friend she is. Oh, this is now a good idea to show you what Shannon and her husband made me. Give me just a sec here. Better put my microphone back on. Shannon and her husband made this for me. They are mechanical pencils, and look at how beautiful that is. In fact, it's so funny, it almost matches this Stargazer Lily. I drew this Stargazer Lily out with this, and tonight I am going to be starting a new painting, just my paintings that I sell, and I'm going to be using this. I love the way it feels in my hand. I'm just, what a great friend. It was so beautiful. Wow. She's awesome. I love Shannon. So thank you. Okay, so there's still some people showing up. Okay, so Shannon says, I'm not painting today, but I wouldn't stretch this one. At 10 by 10, it should be great. And with no background, with water flooded, it shouldn't be an issue at all. Yeah, that's why I'm doing one without a background. And I am actually going to be doing tutorials that are strictly a background. In other words, I might take an image like this, mask out the whole image, and then we are just going to strictly work on a background, do a very detailed, out of focus background, because I know a lot of people struggle with that. Backgrounds are the one areas where people just get lost. Most people don't want to start them first. I always start them first because I'd rather get it out of the way. And if you're going to mess up on anything, you might as well mess up on your background. So that's going to be coming soon. It's a very in-depth tutorial on backgrounds. Everything from just a beautiful wash background with one color, but it'll be pretty in-depth. So that will be forthcoming. So right now, we're going to, I'm still kind of letting that dry, and I'm probably still going to use the hair dryer on it. And one thing you want to note, if you are going to use a hair dryer, make sure you don't have that hair dryer don't get it too close to the masking fluid, because what you can do is actually cook that masking fluid right into that paper. And then when you go to pull it up, you're pulling up paper fibers. And I'm going to show you a little trick too. Once we get to this part, the stamen part, I'm thinking that's probably going to be tomorrow. I'm going to show you what you do after you pull it up, and to make sure that all those fibers are laying flat. But okay, one more thing I want to show you. And one of the other students that follows me, she had suggested Rosemary and Company brushes. They're made in England, and I do have other brushes from Rosemary and Company, but they're sold here in the US from Wind River Arts. Kind of a very cool company. They don't take online orders. You have to call them. They're in Texas. They're just the nicest people. Okay, other than that, this is their version of scrubber brushes. Now, these are only going to be useful for making lines, but I think I might have some areas where it might be useful here. So I got 3 different sizes, and I've already tried them on a few different things, and I absolutely love them. So this is a big thank you to Carolyn for showing me these. I had no idea that Rosemary and Company actually made these, and they're called the Eradicator Brush, and I'm going to put it into the links after we're done with this session. So there's those, and then of course my trusty little Wonder Whites, which I'm sure we'll be using in certain areas. And one of the reasons I like these is because they're nice and rounded, yet they still take off plenty of color when I need it. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that and talk about those things while you're maybe catching up. And I am going to go ahead and get the rest of that dried so we can get onto building up some other layers. So, oh, Shannon, I'm glad you love the pen pencil set. I picked out the magenta acrylic and kit, but Brian did the rest. Brian got to see your lovely comment. Oh, thank you, Brian. I love those. I love the weight of them. They just feel wonderful in my hand. Okay, let me get this dried and let you all catch up. So here's something important about drawing. It feels dry, but I can tell that it's not, because look at the paper. When I press on it, the paper is still kind of up a little bit. So imagine what were to happen if you did this on 140 pound and didn't stretch it. It would be a nightmare. Okay, I think it's getting there, but I decided that I could probably go over here and we could start doing some work on the stem. But here's what I love. Just looking at it right now, you can already see that it's starting to look good. Like you can really see how adding in the grays really just added form. And oh my gosh, wait till we get in that magenta. Oh, it's gonna look so good. I'm very excited about this. I have been wanting to do this for a while, and there's one lady, and I can't think of her name. She's been wanting me to do this for so long, so I hope she's here. You know, you turn 55, and unless every little thing's written down, I just can't remember names anymore. So sorry about that if you're here. Hi. Okay, so let's see. Teresa, I have a Rosemary and Company brush that I love. Didn't know that you could purchase them in the US. Yeah, isn't that great? All I have is a couple of their regular brushes and excellent quality. So again, it's a little company in Texas called Wind River Arts. They do have a website, but you actually have to call them to order. Super, super nice people. Very old school though, but you know what? That's okay. They carry the brushes and they're very, very well made. Like I said, those are going to be specific to veins and lines or trying to get right on a little edge. But you know, that's something I always have problems with. So I love it. I love it when everybody gives me tips and hints about something. You know, I don't know everything. I really don't. And please, if anybody has a good tip about something, let me know and I'll try it out and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's go back over here for a moment. And what I'm going to do, what am I going to do? So my issue when I'm live streaming is I have really just a limited amount of room on my palette. So I am going to clear off that gray. I know, I just mixed it, but for me it's okay. Otherwise I have to get another palette and it just starts cluttering things up, and there we go. And I don't want to make a mess. Okay, so I'm gonna make the green and then I'll just go back and make another shadow again if we need it. But right now I'm going to mix that green. And that'll give this a little bit more time to dry. I just put lots of yellow. And again, normally I paint on a much bigger plate. And I tried that the last time, but it is so hard with the limited real estate on the screen that, you know, and this is what I have to do. No more. Let's just add a little bit more yellow. Make one area pretty yellow. There we go. Okay, so now I have some yellow. So again, when you are, let me pull this up close. When you are mixing your colors, make sure don't overmix. I see a lot of people do that. Throw the color in there, add some water here and there, make some thinner areas, have some thicker areas, have some areas that have more blue greens, more yellow greens. You want a huge variety because as you're painting, you want to be able to just pick that up and be able to add it into different areas. You don't want things to look so monotone. Okay, so that's doing good. I can go ahead, I'm going to push this up a little bit and let's start with this leaf right here. I'm going to use a number 2 again. It's probably my favorite brush is my number 2. I go through those a lot. Okay. I think though, I'm going to go back to my number 4. This little area is pretty big. Let's wet it. And then I'll show you what happens over here when you don't wet it and you add the color. Not worried too much about it sinking in. This is just a small area. See how you get those gentle blends? All right, so now that I'm really looking at this leaf, okay, I'm gonna actually pick up a little bit more yellow. See how I did that? I'll pull that up a little bit more so you can see it. Hopefully you can see how I just dropped in some yellow, got some green in there. And now it's kind of blending instead of just being this one solid color. Now I've noticed right in there, there's a little bit of blue. So I'm going to pick up some watery blue. And I'm going to fix the edge of my leaf, right? Had to make my leaf a little bit wider. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to take this leaf over here. And, oh, one other thing I'm going to point out is there are some little veins in there. And I'm going to show you, in fact, let me pick up some of this. That looks a little dark to me. I should have made that a little bit lighter. Because on the next pass, we're going to avoid the little vein areas, and I'm just going to put a couple in. I'm not going to put every little detail. Like up here, I'll be able to get just those two and a couple of down there. But let me show you on this leaf what happens when you don't add water. I'm going to show you the difference. See how it just kind of looks really flat? You don't get those colors kind of spreading around. Now, I do put color, wet on dry, but that's usually in the layers following. All right. Just going to keep going along. And okay, so at this point, I see this a lot. Don't give up. Sometimes when you're adding the first layers, things may not look the way you think that they should look, but you have to keep going. I think people throw away their paintings too quickly before even giving it a chance. Sometimes, and you're just not sure if you're done, you just really need to keep going. Keep going, build more values, and that's usually what it is. You just haven't added enough saturation, meaning that you've got that color in whatever it happens to be as saturated as it needs to be. So you feel like giving up. You're like, oh, this is turning out terrible. Don't do that. Keep going, keep working on it. It's usually because it just needs some darker values. Honestly, that's what I see most. So if you feel frustrated, dry everything off, take a break, and come back to it. Now, right there you can see that I put wet paint on dry paper, but I immediately followed it with some water. and it just blended right out. I'm really, when I say that, I'm really meaning the giant areas. If it's something small, you don't need to wet it first, but it still might look a little flat. So it may be that, you know, it's going to take some time. It just takes time to learn watercolor. But you know, everything does. There's always a learning curve. Because we are definitely going to come back to these leaves. And again, we'll build in that dark value. Now, I do want to say this. If you are looking at this leaf in here, I'm going to pull this up a little bit because I think this is important. Okay, if you don't want to put the veins in, that's totally fine. You don't have to put any veins in. I am going to put the veins in, but I think that this is really important that you see this. This is why value is so important. So you're looking at this right now and you're thinking, oh no, my little veins aren't going to be light enough compared to what's in the painting. But just wait. We're going to go, and this time we're going to do wet on dry, and we're going to avoid that little line where those veins are. And all of a sudden, that color is going to start to look very light. It looks dark right now, but that's just because there's not a darker color against it. So, and let me stop for a minute and I'll show you that in this little strip. Let me turn it around. So here you can see I've taken and just made some little circles, and I surrounded it with some color. And you can see how right here, that white doesn't look very bright against that color. Now, as you progressively make everything surrounding it darker, look at how light that circle means. That's why value is extremely important when you're painting. You can have absolutely gorgeous color, but if you don't have value to go along with it, your painting is going to look flat. So value is the workhorse and color gets all the glory. So that's really important to remember. So right now, and this might be a better way to explain why you shouldn't give up on your paintings. You just need to go a little bit farther and build darker values. If you were to just look at this and think, well, that's it, those leaves really aren't standing out right now. They're kind of flat, but as soon as we go back in with some of those darker values, they're really going to start standing out. So let's see. Shannon, let's see, I'm just reading some of the comments. She started the first layer. Oh, okay. Thank you, Shannon, for explaining that. Thank you. Okay, so now let me, even though that's wet, I can go ahead. This is such a small area. Just get some of that green in there. I noticed right along the stem, it's pretty blue down there. So I just filled in with a little bit more blue. Is that all that important? I guess it just depends on what your painting style is. But I like to put in those details. But you certainly don't have to. Now I'm going to grab a little bit. I grabbed a very watery area of that red because this leaf has a lot of red in it. And you're probably thinking, well, they're just leaves. But the more variation you have in your leaves, the better. Otherwise, they're just going to all kind of blend together. So I'm just adding in some red where I see it. Doing that right along that edge too. It's pretty dry. So I'm just adding a light layer of red and then blending the side out a little bit. Okay, let's let all that dry. Oh, wait, I forgot that leaf. Okay. I am going to turn this around. I'm going to turn the image too so that it's just easier for me to paint from this direction. This time, it's just a tiny amount of that green. I really, really added water to that area. I already feel good about this one. I can already feel that it's going to turn out well. Light values. Now, let me stop for a minute and talk about what I mean about these putting darker values. I am not at all saying that we're going to put really dark color in here. But what I mean by value structure is that whether your painting leans towards very light colors or your painting tends to have a lot of darker values, no matter which way it leans, it's important to have a variation in those values. And that's what we're going to work on in this one. There aren't a lot of dark areas, but in the areas that are a little bit darker value, we really want to make sure that we really concentrate on those areas. So it makes everything else stand out. Oh, that might have been too dark. And we really should put the grays in here. And I should have done that. So yeah, we'll just worry about that last because I already have, I've already got the greens. I'm going to flip this around. And because those greens are drying fast, okay, let me flip around my image. I'm going to hit it with the hairdryer just a little bit, and then we can start adding in some of those darker values. Now, one of the reasons why this area dried so quickly is because I wasn't putting, 2 and 3 layers of water on it to really get sunk in. Like for instance, that is going to really need the hairdryer because it's still raised up a little bit. So that's why we're going to keep over here on the leaves. All right. So now you're going to see what I am talking about with this area right here, with those lines. Here's also a great thing. Now my colors have started to dry, which I'm glad about. So I can add just a little bit of water, make some areas thinner, and now I have those nice thick areas where it kind of dried a little bit. Okay. Same thing. And get up just the tip. This time it is wet on dry. And now that I've got the color on, if I wanted to add a little bit of darker area, I can. Okay, now I'm going to go right between where those two veins were. So now that area that didn't look very light, it looks really light now. And that's a great way to do veins. Grab some more yellow. Got kind of spotty there, so just adding a little bit more yellow. There we go. So now I have those little veins right in there. They're a little thick. Beautiful. Now, what's going to be really nice is we have the magenta flower and the green leaves, and they're opposite on the color wheel. So these greens are really going to pop, and so is the magenta, because they're going to play against each other. So that's going to look really nice. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this little stem, but this time I'm adding a little bit of that red over here into that green. Except for that didn't turn out the way I thought. Okay, let's start over. See, even I don't get it right, just right off the bat. Now I'll add a tiny bit of red. There we go. Okay. I think I got it now. So it's still, let me get off some of that green. If you notice, there's a little highlight right under there. If you don't get it, that's okay though. I'm not going to get every little detail on here. If it was my own painting, I would, but it doesn't, you don't have to have that in there. Now see how adding that red kind of dulled that down a little bit and brought the saturation down and also darkened it a little bit. There's also another little highlight right over there. And again, if I was doing this on my own, I probably wouldn't have allowed so much yellow in that area, but now did you see how I picked up a little bit of that red? So now it changed it again, and now you can really see that just that little amount of red changed it, made it look like it's kind of curved under a little bit. Now I'm going to go back to that yellow-green. I just added it right on the side, just on the dry paper. I'm just using my brush as I'm going along, just kind of blending it out. And look at how much depth. Ooh, this is the part that I love. Okay, I'm getting overexcited. I just love it though when it just all of a sudden things just start, you just start seeing form and shadow. I love that. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to, let's see, the darker green. Kind of wanted that to stay a little bit yellow, but it didn't. That's okay. I can always scrub that out later if I want. Okay, now a little bit more of that reddish green right along the side here. See how I put the color down and then I just blended it out with some water. I'm going to pull this up a little bit so hopefully you can see it better. There we go. And now it doesn't look flat. It just doesn't look like a green stem. There's areas where they're light and there's some dark areas. It just looks so much nicer. So now I'm going back over to this area. So I just keep adding a little bit more at a time. Oop, whoa, that was way too much. Oh no. There we go. So I'm not going to drag too much of that green down in this area. If you notice that there's a lot of that just kind of a really dull red, well, that's a beautiful reflection somehow from the magenta in there. Well, you want that. That's what makes it look interesting. And now, so right underneath this area that I'm, let's see, making sure my brush is a little bit dry. Still too wet. I'll have to wait a little bit. I'll come back and put some more of that in there later. Just going to soften this a bit. And a little bit down there. And those are things, if you need to pull out little highlights, that's exactly what scrubbing is for. In fact, I'll bet you that scrubber, those new scrubbers that I got, the Rosemary and Company, that one's probably going to work great right along those little edges. So I'm excited to try that. Okay, so I think the stem was looking pretty good, other than a few things that need to be fixed. So now let's work on this stem right there. And it's the same thing. Let me get a bigger brush. Just kind of get some more of that green in there. Let's see. Okay, maybe a little bit more. Okay, so now this leaf right here, it looks pretty flat. So it needs, obviously, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wet the whole thing. And again, if you've followed along, you obviously know, you've been watching my other tutorials or live streams, you know that because these are transparent staining colors, I can keep adding water on top of it and it's not going to go anywhere. Now I'm going to go ahead and come over here. This time I am going to wet it just a little bit. So I put a little bit of red in that area, and now I'm going to put just a little bit of that blue. Adding a little bit more yellow. That was a little bit, right on that edge was a little bit too blue. See how I keep varying? So now I added some more red down there, so we've got some different areas. Color, keep it interesting. I kind of lost that little stem, but that's going to be a good use for that Rosemary and Company brush. So give me just a sec here. I am going to go let my dogs outside since I'm the only one home right now. So I will be back in a few minutes, and that might give everybody a chance to catch up. All right, I am back. Okay, let's see, before I get started, let's see if anybody had any questions or if Shannon has already answered them. Shannon, I very much like starting with the stems. I tend to just give up on them when the painting is so close to being done. This way is nice. Yeah, you know, honestly, I end up doing that too. And leaves, you know, it's really important that you kind of pay attention to stems and leaves, especially in florals. I mean, they're important too. They add to the whole background, especially if you are doing a background and you want to make sure that they're all varied and you've just got a lot of things going on. So they are important. And the other Shannon, I was taught that the most realistic shadows are made by blending a color's complement into it. That red on the shadow side of the stem shows that perfectly and is gorgeous. Love it. Yeah, because again, everything is a reflection. You know, colors are always reflecting. And as I always say, shadows are not black. They're not Mars black, tube black, which is a tube black, or, you know, Payne's gray. It is, shadows are made up of everything around it. So, oh, good tip, Shannon. Here's a tip if you watch this on TV. If her painting looks too vibrant or dull, check your picture mode presets. Good idea. You know, and that I should say that more often when we get started. A lot of times what I'm painting, or these colors right here, you may not necessarily see that on your screen. So, and you know, I also spent a lot of years in graphic design, and we used to always calibrate our screens so that you could really see what was going on. So yes, if that is the issue, you might want to just check that carefully. Okay, so I'm going to leave that leaf alone, and I'm going to go ahead and start with that stem, and then I'll be able to come over and finish that stem up. Then we're going to come over, and I'm going to have to mix grays again. Why didn't somebody say something? Come on, people, work with me here. I'm going to have to add some more gray over there. All right, let's get some green in here. Okay. All right, let's see. Let me move this up so you can see this a little bit better. Now I see a little bit more blue. And even if you can't see okay, green is an extremely hard color for most people to see clearly, which is interesting because, you know, it seems like most of our world is made up of green. So I'm not really there. I know there's a theory for that. Just even if you can't see it all the way, really try to vary things. It will make a difference, even if you don't think that you're seeing it. I'd say that little area is probably the darkest part of all of these leaves, honestly. So I'm really, in fact, I'm going to switch to a very small brush. I am going to switch to my 0. You can already see how just putting in those darker colors, it's really starting to make it stand out. Okay, a little bit more. And then I also have a very nice shadow edge right there where it looks like that upper petal maybe is cutting it off. And I always think, especially along there and there, that it's always really important to get that in, because then that really lets you see, and it kind of lends some realism to it. So I have to get that in there. Let me get it a little bit darker. Fix that line. There we go. And while I'm here, let's fix that little shadow line. Well, that didn't really go there, but again, I can see some areas I need to fix, but so far so good. Same here, you can, right in that area, there's a nice, beautiful shadow. Make sure you get that in. It's going to make a huge difference in your painting. And as you saw, every time I go and add a layer, I can see something else that kind of needs to be darkened. That is looking really nice. I'm very happy with this stem. Now I'm going to come over here. Now I'm just going to blend that line out. I'm actually going to make that a little darker on the side there. Okay. Now this is what I'm talking about right there. A nice hard edge on that shadow. Look at how fun this little area is here. Might be hard to see on the screen. We can see where the shadow cuts off and then comes over again. They may be minor details, but I think they make a huge difference. Look at that. I love it. Oh, I can also see a little shadow right over here. All right, I'm going to switch back to my bigger brush. And let's get this leaf. Okay. I'm doing the same thing here that I was trying to achieve up there. I'm not very happy with that leaf, but that will be something to fix at the very end. Again, I'm just varying those greens. I'm adding some yellows. Okay, maybe just a little bit more yellow right in there. See, and as I look at it, I keep seeing this area needs more yellow, this needs more green, and now as I'm looking, it's kind of red right there. And see, I kept my little lines. I'm just blending them out just a bit so they're not so prominent. There we go. Now let's work on this leaf. Again, I'm going back with the red. And let's grab some of the green. And I know I've said this before too, but I would have probably spent a good 4 hours on these leaves if I were doing them just as a painting. Because I like to get every little nuanced little area. So while I'm waiting for that edge to dry so I can get in that little leaf there, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got a nice bright green again. And finish up this leaf right here. Just taking a wet brush and just kind of blending that color. I've got enough on there that I didn't have to worry about getting any hard edge. And there's a lovely little shadow right there that's from this stem. As soon as that dries, I'll put that in. Just adding a little bit of red at the bottom of the stem. Now, I think I can, no, I'm gonna have to wait. I can see a couple other places that need some shadows added in, but everything's still a little wet. So let me dry it. Okay, back to my small brush. Just got to find it here. My number 2. And then add a little bit more green to that shadow right there. Now that shadow that's falling across that leaf. There we go. Hopefully you can really see now how those colors, those darkened values are really making a huge difference now. Now the stem looks interesting. Just darkened up that red a little bit, and now and let's just get this area right here. So there you go. This is a good example of why, yeah, the color is important, but what really makes these stems stand out is the shadows, building up those darker values. Okay, I'm pretty happy with them. I might add a little bit more color along this stem. I'm gonna have to go back with that little scrubber and pull out those leaves. I'm not too happy with how those veins look. Okay. This little guy has got a lot of blue in there. This one I may have to do a second. I will have to do a second layer just so I can build up some of those values. All right, I'm pretty happy considering how much we got done on these with the time we have. So while I'm letting the rest of this dry, I'm going to go ahead and clean off that green off the palette, and we will finish this little guy right here. Get some water. Okay. One nice thing about only having to worry about 3 colors is it's not such a stretch to have to go make those colors again. But if you're not comfortable with that, obviously use a bigger plate or use a few plates. Again, it's kind of hard for me to do that. So I have to clean my areas off, but that's good though, because now you can see how I'm mixing these colors. Okay, so let's mix that gray again. That gray has a lot of red in it. Oop, boy, that was too much again, wasn't it? Okay. All right. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to wet that. I should have turned it around, but okay, that's... Okay, so let's grab some of that gray. Let's let it sit here for a sec. Oh, Lisa, she says she loves the leaves. Yeah, I think it's turning out good. I'm really happy. Those little spots of dark really accent the brighter leaves. I still have, I have some fussing. I'm not very happy with that leaf, and I really want to work on that one. But all in all, not too bad. Again, I think value is really the most important part of it. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to get a smaller brush again. Okay. There we go. Let's add a little bit more blue to that. I have more of a purple shadowy color. Now up here, this area, has just a little bit more yellow in it. So you can see how I'm varying all of those colors. A little bit more that reddish purple. I'm going to pick up, I'm picking up, I picked up some of that red. Okay. There we go. Let's grab a little bit more red. There we go. That's what that needed. And then I'm still going to obviously have to put the lines in. So as soon as that dries, I'll get those lines in. Okay, it's looking pretty good. These, and don't forget, these colors are really going to stand out too once we get that magenta. Lisa, are you wiping your brush when you go to the left off the camera? Sometimes I am. I know it's hard to see the where I wipe. I guess I could kind of keep it right there so you can see that. Sometimes I will blot it. Sometimes it just depends on if I need extra water. If you can hear the clinking, most of the time I'm grabbing a little extra water. You know, I just noticed down here, let me, on the screen, there we go. I just wanted to get the tip of that. I just looked down and saw that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is get this area dry. Wow, that is really starting to look good. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy with this one. I really am. I just feel like I really got the grays in there correctly, and it was almost like I just nailed getting everything just right. Okay, so that's pretty dry. So now I want to keep my colors the way they are, and now I'm going to go with my number 2. I'm going to pick up some of that color. I'm adding water. Let me say this too. You probably noticed that I don't have a little sheet of paper where I check my colors. You can do that. I just, because it's just the 3 colors, I don't worry so much about whether or not I have the right color, but that might be something that you would want to do. Especially when you're first learning. Oh, it needs to be a little bit more red. I guess the thing is when you're only painting with 3 colors, you can just quickly adjust on the fly. Oh, sorry about that. It's one of my dogs. Okay, let's see. And then right along here. Now it's really going to start standing out. Let's see, Shannon saying the color on the blood on the bud is really beautiful. Amazing how those little variations of gray create such a lovely look. Thank you, Shannon. It's true. And again, because you're only working with 3 colors, you're not having to focus on what color to use where. You're just like, well, this is either going to need a little bit more yellow or it's going to need a little bit more blue. That's the part I love. So hopefully you saw that I did that. I had a little tiny bit of green still right there, so I just picked it up and I'm just using it to kind of define those areas a little bit. I'm adding some red over here. Just making those nice little pointed areas. And that's what's nice too when your palette starts getting dirty, is not dirty, that's the wrong word to use. When your palette starts getting lots and lots of different colors and values, is you can save all those and pick them up when you need them. Later on, if I can remember it, I'll show you what my palette ended up looking like as I was finishing up my cherries and limes still life. My gosh, it was a mess. And you can see how it's really creating harmony too, because of those 3 colors. And instead of me having 4 different blues or 4 different reds, I'm using only what I have on the palette. And I'm having to think carefully about how I can take advantage, what I can do to vary those 3 colors. Let me tell you, if that doesn't teach you color theory, starting with a limited palette, I think that does more for you than just years of college or art classes, honestly. That was probably hard to see me put that line right there. Now more yellow. Look at how that yellow really stands out now against that purple color there, because they're opposites on the color wheel. Okay, so now went out a little bit too far with that red. But look at how that little rib right there, let me pull it up to the camera a little bit. Look at how that rib really sticks out now. Just going to quickly, right over here in the corner, just mix up a bright green. There we go. See, there's not much value, but there is some, and every little bit you put in there makes a difference. Add a little bit of yellow on my brush, and it dulled this little area down right here. Oh, that was awful dark. So now I'm just picking up some of that color. So I want to keep that area up top light. Look at how pretty that is. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy with that. A little bit more red. That is looking so pretty. A little bit of yellow there. So that's all I'm doing is I'm just little by little adding in those darker colors. So you can really see how, and let me lift this up again. You can really see how once I had the color there and on that side, look at how that center rib, for lack of a better word, look how that really stood out. So now I can see a few things down in there. I can see that I lost some of the white there, but that new little brush is going to be great for pulling that out. And then again, just a little bit of red at the bottom. And again, you notice I haven't dulled, nothing's dull, I've created harmony. I don't have to worry about my colors making mud. Probably needs to be a little bit darker down in this area. And there we go. I think I'm going to leave that for now, and if I have to, I'll come back to it. But I think it looks actually very nice. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone, and let's see. I know there were some things down here. Oh, yep, that little tiny. Okay, so I'm going to turn this palette. Let's just get this, and then we'll move on to something else. And then if we see things later on, I can come back. But let's get just that little bit of green. And just kind of putting in some lines. Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave this now, and let's see, where are we at? Okay, it's only 11 o'clock. Wow, time flies when you're having fun, right? Okay, so far so good. Let's go ahead. What is going to be, what am I going to start on? Okay, here's how I think I'm going to approach this whole flower. I'm going to do this leaf, I'm sorry, not leaf. I'm going to do this petal by petal. That way you don't get overwhelmed. Adding in those shadow colors, that was easy. But now we're going to get into an area where we're going to really have to focus where we put that magenta. So let's go ahead and do that petal by petal. And what I'm going to do, though, is change my water. All right, let me get that clipped back in here. Let's see. Is that part of the leaf that got clipped off when you removed the background? Haha, you know what, Shannon, you're probably right. I'm just going to pretend that it's folded over. Okay, next question. Lisa, is this being recorded for viewing later? Absolutely. As soon as it's done, and I've noticed that it pops up fairly quickly, I think within 15 minutes, if not less. So yeah, you can watch this at any time. And that's actually a good way to think about it, is that watching it first is always so helpful. And then going back once you see that sometimes I kind of go all over the place or focus on one area, at least you'll know what to do at that point. Oh, thank you, Shannon. That was nice of you. Okay, so here we go. I am going to start with this leaf right here. And there's an area right in there that has got yellow and white. So I want to keep that. I don't want my my magenta to go into that area. Okay. Leaf or the petals all wet with water. Just wait for it to soak in here. You know, and I should say too, feel free, if anybody kind of feels like I'm getting off track, say something. I honestly don't mind. It would be so nice if I had an assistant that could help keep me on track. And if I forget the name of something, which does happen when you're trying to teach and film, I don't have any assistant. So I actually have to watch and make sure that I don't have, you know, that I'm filming correctly and everything's matching it. So I'm kind of doing all this on my own. So feel free if you think I'm leaving something out. I honestly don't mind. That's why I'm so grateful to Shannon when she helps me. It's just, I have to do it all by myself. Okay, so I'm going to clean off again. I want, oops, grab some of that red. I want a nice clean painting area. Let's clean up that red. Okay. While that's soaking in, I honestly don't think I have to do much to this red. I think I might just go ahead and put it down. Just that magenta. Okay, I'm going to switch back to a smaller brush, my number 2 again. Let me make sure that that's soaked in. Red tends to spread quickly. Let me just test a little area. All right, I think we're okay. I just didn't want it to shoot out across the paper, so. Now, when you are putting color down on a wet area, every once in a while, blot your brush. One of the reasons why is because as you're putting color down, you're also picking some of that, you're wicking some of that water up. Now, did you see how when I first put the color down, it was pretty watery. Then I went ahead and picked up some thicker color and put it right over that area. And I've just been kind of pulling it down. So now I'm going to grab some more thick color. So I'm building value. And probably what I should have done was maybe mask out some of those little yellow areas. Because now they're going to be kind of orangish, but I'll figure that out. That's probably going to be something for tomorrow to figure out. Ooh, look at that. Looking good. Now, what I just did was I wet my brush, and I didn't offload my brush. I just kept it wet. So I want to make sure that this color is blending out nicely. So you can also see how we're going to have to take some blue, or not so much the blue, some purples. I'll have to mix, my blue and my magenta together to get a really nice purple and put it over this magenta for more of those shadow areas. Okay, I think so far, well, maybe a little bit more over here. So far, so good. Now, did you see how I took my brush and I went this direction? Had I have gone that direction, in the minute I lifted my brush, it would have spread out in that little tiny area. So when you're doing something where you want it to stay a nice sharp point, go the opposite direction. See, as it's soaking into the paper, I can add a little bit heavier color. So in other words, you can see where I'm picking it from, right on that edge. It's a little bit thicker. And this will save me some time building up those values later. This is going to be beautiful. Okay, so what I need to do now is I'm going to skip. So I can't do the petal right next to it. So I'm going to do that one, skip that one, and then do that one. And then I can just keep going around so that I don't bleed into any other area. So I'm going to give that a couple seconds and I'm going to see what anybody has to say. And Shannon says, I'm very happy to help. I'm always glad when you let people know that I'm not just a know-it-all trying to answer questions directed to you. Of course you're not. Everybody, please give a big thank you to Shannon. Not only is she a wonderful person, and her husband made me that gorgeous pen and pencil set, but she is so helpful. She's absolutely a wonderful person. Thank you. I appreciate everything you've done. So, oh yeah, let's see. So Shannon also says, I'm not someone who uses gouache, but the yellow is pollen sitting on top of the petals, not something part of the petals. I think this could be a place to utilize it effectively. Yes, you absolutely could. I will tell you something honestly. I have used white gouache or white watercolor on occasion, and this was before I knew about really about scrub brushes, but I would definitely use them to pull out white areas. So yeah, you definitely could do that. Okay, so let's turn it. Okay, and back to my number 6. Now, this is where the masking, I'm hoping, is going to pay off. I'm avoiding that little area there that's white. But again, I think that masking fluid probably was going to be more trouble than it was worth. And I should have completely avoided that area right there. So I'll have to be very careful. There's a lot of red in my brush. Should have cleaned it better. All right, now back to my number 2. Okay, give it a few seconds to sink in, and let's see what another comment is. Teresa, Shannon, you do not come off as a know-it-all at all. We all appreciate you. Yep, we do. That's, you take, all of our time is valuable, and the fact that you help me along here is just, it's wonderful. Maybe one of these days I can afford an assistant. Somebody to help. It would be nice if they were sitting right here with me. Oops, should have bled off some of that color, but that's okay. It's nice and look, it's nice. Got a nice edge here. Look at that. Beautiful. Just rinsed my brush off so I can blend this in a little bit. That is kind of nice when you don't have to paint around something, but I think I have a lot of holes in there again, if you heard me mention that earlier. As I was reading the directions, it was saying, make sure you bleed off the bubbles, but I kept using it and the bubbles kept coming, so I don't know. Okay, let's pull that away so we can see it. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it back so we can look at it. Oh, it's going to be, I think this is going to be fabulous. Okay, I'm going to turn it again and go ahead and start on that petal. Okay. Oop, I forgot to make a line, so I just kind of stopped the water right there. And again, I'm avoiding that little white area. Look at how I can go right over those shadows and I'm not worrying about the color lifting. Okay, back to, where's my number 2? Okay, back to my number 2. Notice again how I'm starting over there, trying to bring that color back into that center area. I'm just getting some thicker color. One thing I am seeing that we're definitely going to have to do is add some yellow in some of these brighter areas. That will stop it from being just too even of a color, but it will also help it give it that glow. See again how I pulled my brush that way. I just got some of I just dipped my brush in water so I don't put too much color. This area that's fading out. Okay. Now, I'm not going to be able to get in all of the value right away, but even getting in some of it on that first layer helps. It's amazing to me when a painting gets to this point on all of the values and the saturations that we've achieved just from these three colors. And you look at that blue and you'd think there's no way there's any of that blue in there. And you'd think, how in the world is that greenish blue going to make a gorgeous purple? But it does. That's actually, if you guys haven't heard me say it before, that's called a printer's palette. Those are the colors that a printing company uses to get their magazines done. And that's basically CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and they add black in. Okay, I'm going to turn this back again. So let's see. I'm going to have to dry it now, unless it's definitely going to need to be dry a little bit. Okay, I think we got it pretty dry. I'm going to give it a sec to feel it again. So let's see, who else? Oh, Pat Edwards. Hi, Pat. You're impressed with all the colors so far. So am I. You know, it's funny. Sometimes things just flow when you paint. The bad thing, and I don't know if this is necessarily bad, but if you're live streaming, sometimes maybe things aren't going to flow and you just have to power through it. When you're at home, you can always just throw your paintbrush down and go, I'm just going to come back to this later. So I'm just really happy that this is it's flowing pretty well. So, well, let's see. Let me give this another second or two. Okay, that's probably good enough. Okay, let's do this petal right here. I'm going to use my good size dragon's tongue, which will hold a lot of water. So I can get all the water on there. Okay. Oop, there's a lot of red still in that brush. Okay. We'll just give that a second to sink in. Let's see. Seema, some people warn one against using masking fluid if you also use a hairdryer, as the warmth will make the fluid stick to the paper. So yeah, well, I don't know if you could see it, but I was trying to cover it with my hand. And usually if you stay about 6 inches above, I've never had a problem, but yes, you definitely can. You can cook that masking fluid right into the paper, so you have to be careful. All right, so it's sunk in pretty good. Okay. I didn't offload my brush this time because this is a very big petal. But I'm still using my number 2. See how this is what I was talking about. So I'm going to load my brush. Watch when I start right here and pull it down and then lift it up. See what happens? So if you want nice, beautiful lines, go the other direction. Like, for instance, if you need a vein or like this where the color fades out, start at that end and work your way back. Trying to stay away from those little white areas right there. Now I'm going to get some thicker color. And again, I'm going to start this direction and pull it forward. Oop. Okay, that looks a mess, but what I'm going to do is I added some water. And I just kind of blended it out. And don't forget, your colors will blend out a little bit too as you're painting. There, that's better. We are definitely going to be able to get this finished tomorrow. This is going to be just great. I'm very happy so far. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to turn. Okay. And again, with the big brush, I wish I hadn't hit that little white area. I'm going to have to be very careful there now. Okay. Clean paper towel. One thing about transparent colors is they can really cling to your brush. Sometimes I must admit, I've gotten lazy and I haven't cleaned my brush well. I've dumped color where I didn't want it. Okay, now let's just give that a second. Okay, it's actually sinking in fairly quickly, and it's a big petal. Oops, see, I went right over that green area. Well, I guess it was like I said earlier, best laid plans and everything. So I make mistakes. I think it's good for beginners to know that. When I was doing a lot of art shows, people would ask me, you know, do you teach? How do you, and just a lot of questions. And people saying, I don't know, I'll never be able to do that. And I said, well, you know, I always thought that too, but you know what? You never see an artist's failures. It's not like you're going to have a gallery or an art show and you're going to put up your worst pieces. We all have failures, and I've had a lot of them, and boy, I kick myself now that I haven't kept those. I think it would be valuable for me if I were able to look back and say, oh wow, that's really bad. I actually have one that I sell quite a bit of. It is goldfinches on some autumn leaves, and I really overworked the leaves. That being said, it's not a horrible painting, but it isn't one of my best. So that's one I can think of that. So I sometimes cringe when I look at it. So far, so good. Oh, see. I'm going to use one of my scrubbers right there to just soften that edge. I didn't mean to get into that white area, and to me that's a very important highlight right there. Okay. There we go. That color just needed to be blended out a little bit. And I'll be able to fix that little area. Now I can see some areas where I really should have got a little bit more gray, but that's okay. I will fix that, work on that tomorrow. I am really excited that I've been basically not only able to get all those leaves in and do that gorgeous blossom, but we've at least been able to get all of the main petals, that first color in. Shannon, you're so funny. I wish you lived close too. I would love to have you helping me. Well, I just need to bring the water all the way up in here. I'll just have to stay away right there. I have my line, have my mark. And tomorrow we're going to find out what happens underneath that masking fluid, that new Daniel Smith that I've tried. Okay. So I'm just kind of going right over that masking fluid. Be careful when doing what I just did, because you don't want to create such a dry spot that it causes a blossom. So just rinsing my brush. Thinning that color out a little bit. And if you're not comfortable with trying to get darker areas in, just do a light area of magenta and go over it a few times. That's okay too. It takes a while to get comfortable with how thick the paint should be. Okay, let's see. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah. Very true about what Shannon is saying about the natural fiber brushes versus synthetic. So I kind of switch back and forth. I usually use my natural fiber brushes on big backgrounds or when I really need to hold a lot of paint in my brush. One of the reasons why I love synthetic brushes, though, is because I can go in and I can do a lot of detail. So I use both, and I just kind of vary it just depending on what I am painting at the moment. And then let's see, Lisa, how do you know when to stop and wait for the next layer? I'd be tempted to put all the paint on the petal at one time. So that is a very good question, Lisa. There are some artists that do that. They don't like fussing around with layer after layer. I find, though, that when you just dump a bunch of color, you're not getting that stained glass stacking like, you would see those colors coming up from underneath. And what happens is when you put on really thick color, no matter how saturated it is, some of it's going to stay on the surface. So you want to give color a chance with the water layers to sink in, blend with those other colors, and that way you get a really good glow. But sure, you can do that. Oh, hi, Carol. I'm watching and we'll paint later. I'm enjoying this so much. Oh, I'm glad. I was telling everybody about you suggesting to me the eradicator brushes, so I'm glad you're watching. But yeah, back to layers. It's just Oh my gosh, I wish I could remember a couple of artists that they would teach on PBS, and he liked to paint the way I do, and she just wanted to get the color down on the paper. And she would start with a light layer and a big thick brush and put it down, and then go over it with a real dark color, and that would pretty much be about it. You know, I guess there are lots of different ways to paint. This is how I like to paint. I just love being able to see all the subtle blends, because now what I'm going to do is we're going to go over and we're going to add a little bit, some yellow areas in here to really pick up some glow. And then we're going to add more blue. Well, we're not going to add that blue by itself. I'm going to mix it with some red, and we're going to throw some beautiful areas of purple in there where you can see towards the outer edges of these petals. And then I'm going to make sure I get some nice thick red in there so we can get those beautiful stripes. So that is going to really liven it up. It is looking good right now, but it's definitely gonna really stand out. And then, you know, once we put those gorgeous light greens and a little bit of those yellows and then those gorgeous, beautiful stamens, that whole thing is just gonna pop. So I think it's gonna be beautiful. So let's see, what should I do now? I honestly think that I probably don't want to do any more on these petals, but I am going to flip it around because the color right next to this little area is dry, and it is right there too. So I want to get those couple things in before we call it a day and finish up tomorrow. So let's go ahead and mix up that gray again. So again, I'm mixing that purple. Let's get a little bit more red in there. And just a touch of that yellow. Okay, so let's see. Let me turn it back this way. Oh, I had a little bit of that gray on my brush, but that's okay. And I completely lost. There was a beautiful little highlight right there. And then watch this. So now I'm going to take a little bit of that green that's still over there on my palette. I'm going to let that blend out. Oh, and there was a little bit more yellow than the green. And I just let it just kind of blend it out right into that beautiful shadow there. And there's a nice little dark area I missed too, but I'll get that in later. And it's lovely when these colors start going together and they don't create mud. It's just beautiful. Okay, so now let's come over here. I just picked up some of that green I had. Just let it blend out into that shadow. Same there. Okay. Let's come down here. Get a little bit of that green right in there. Okay, so one thing I see that's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll do this at the very end, is getting all those little ends that are starting to die off. And that's going to be fun because we'll mix up a little bit of burnt sienna and we'll put that right in there. And while I've got some of that gray there, I'm going to darken it right along this area, except for I'm going to use a bigger brush. If I can find it. Okay, there we go. Just to find that shadow a little bit more. Now what I'm going to do is pick up a little bit of yellow, a little bit more yellow. Add it right at that bottom. And I'm not worried about creating mud because I'm using transparent colors. Look at that. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my smaller one and get this gray a little bit darker. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone now. I just wanted to get a couple more little areas done. Ooh, how about right there? Let's finish that little spot up. Oh, this is going to look good. I'm very happy with this. I can't wait to see it done tomorrow, and I definitely think it's going to be finished. I don't think it's going to take a third day. So Teresa, so much good information today. I'm still very new to watercolor, so all information has helped you. Thank you for all the tips and tricks. You're very welcome. Stick around tomorrow, or if you can't, we'll go ahead and you can watch the replay. And then tomorrow we are going to take off the masking fluid and we're going to get this whole thing done. And I should have said this earlier, and I didn't, but if I actually have a little community area now on my website, and it shows up in your homepage, and you can click on that, and it's a little bit more private than Facebook. So if you want to post what you've done so far and you don't want people to see it, you can post it in there, and it's only the people that are part of my watercolor group and are on my watercolor website. And then you can post the picture there and we can talk back and forth. It's just a better place to share things without having it to be completely public. So, and I will post the link to, once this is done and over with, I will put all that up in the thumbnail area. So yeah, so let's see if anybody has any other questions for what we've done so far today. Okay, not seeing anything else yet. I know there's always that few second delay, so I'll give it another minute or two, but yes, so again, I will post that community link, or if you're comfortable and you want to put it on my Watercolors That Glow group, we can certainly do it that way too. So however you're most comfortable, but I really want to see what everybody's done so far, or just, again, just asking questions. We can do that on Facebook or on my little community tab on my website, and we can just keep going back and forth. And again, we're going to be painting again tomorrow, so you might think of something to ask then. And let's see, Shannon, your bud has more dimension and is more beautiful than the photo. It just looks so cool. I can't get over it. Ah, thank you. Yeah, you know, I'm really happy with how it turned out. In fact, I might even pull up a little bit more, let me do it from this end, a little bit more light along that green area. And, you know, and again, I can't do every little itty bitty single detail that I would like as I'm painting, but you know, in fact, let me go back to the front view here. Okay, everybody again. Okay, so what I was saying is I can't get every little detail in there. I mean, we could have gone, you know, 8 hours on this, but I try to get as much as I can. I think as I teach, I'll get better at that. But yeah, it's really hard to get so much detail in there. But I think so far it's turning out really good. I can't wait to see everybody's. Let's see, Shannon. Oh, wait a minute, Sherry, just painting away and enjoying your great instruction. Yay, I'm glad. And Amalia, thank you so much for today, Debbie. You're very welcome. You know, at first I worried. I thought, oh my gosh, 3 hours seems like a long time, but I can't even believe 3 hours just went by. It's just so funny how, you know, if you're in high school and math is your worst subject and it happens to be your last class, you know, 5 minutes is like 3 hours. So yeah, it's just funny. Here, let me turn this a little bit. Yeah, so I think this was fun, and I hope everybody, at least, you know, if you didn't get to paint, you can watch it, and if not, you show up tomorrow and can watch, or just watch the replays. So again, I will post that community link if you don't see it in your homepage, or just post it in that Facebook, my watercolor group. So. Okay, so I'm going to sign off, and then, like I said, we could talk in Facebook or in the community group, and I'm going to go get all those links put on right now. So thanks everybody for joining in, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Okay, so bye everybody.